All right, moving on to our next segment. We're going to get into the AFC North. Got another special guest with me, Mr. New Stripe City himself. Y'all know him as Ace. He's a fixture in the Cincinnati Bengals community. Listen, very seldomly do you get on the internet and find people who are not only knowledgeable but actually close to a situation. And we're fortunate enough to have met off the internet. Introduce you to him, my guy Ace. You guys probably know him, Ace, Mr. New Stripe City himself. Welcome in, my friend. How are you this evening?
I'm doing great, brother. Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Appreciate you joining me, man. Obviously, you got a lot going on in the offseason here. Super Bowl, then one game short of the Super Bowl, and then you get a left tackle, and you lose both your safeties. But before all that, before we get into that, just let the people know who you are, your podcast, your work. I want people to make sure they check it out. I don't want to mispronounce anything. Obviously, I said your Twitter, but let the people know where they can find you before we get into the conversation, and then we'll proceed.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm Ace Boogie. I represent a couple of different platforms, but mainly most people know me as @NewStripeCity on Twitter. They know me from the Cincinnati podcast, which I do with my partner Zim, where we dive into all things Bengals. We do player interviews. We do all kinds of dope stuff over there. Also on another YouTube channel called AFC North Talk, where we cover the AFC North as well. Then I have my own channel, which I started, which is New Stripe City on YouTube.
Awesome, man. And make sure I'm subscribed. I try to check out anything you drop new. Like you said, with New Stripe City and the Cincinnati pod, if people are to check out the content, they see that you're all things Cincinnati. You're in the mix. You're in the trenches with the fans, with the players, with everything involved. So
Yes,
to
sir.
kick it off, you already know where I'm going to go. You know where I'm going with everything. Is Mr. Shiesty going to be ready for week one? Because that's everyone's concern. That's every talking point on the internet. And I'm going to be as cliche as I possibly can and just get it out of the way. What's the deal with Joe? What are your thoughts on the situation and how's it being managed? Your thoughts on that to start. That's how we kick it off.
Yeah, it's almost kind of like deja vu, even though it's a different injury. Joe has always had some kind of reason to keep him out of training camp. This time it happens to be a calf. It's not anything where I feel like anybody's panicking, because I felt like if that were to be the case, they would have signed someone better than Trevor Siemian to be the backup quarterback in that situation. Looking into it, I kind of reached out to Pro Football Doc. He's a former NFL doctor for the I believe it was the San Diego Chargers when they were still there. And he said that he didn't think that it was anything too crazy. It was a grade 1 calf strain. From what I've heard, I know that they've closed kind of the facility to the public. From what I've heard, he's still working out. He's still out there throwing passes and stuff like that. I think he's on track to play week one. I think right now you're just going to hear a lot of coach speak from Zach Taylor, just because he wants the Browns to be prepared for anything. But I would expect Joe to be there. I don't think the calf strain is going to take him out. I think the most important thing is them making sure that it's not going to linger. So he was spotted around the facility without that wrap that he had on his leg before. So I think he's going to be good to go week one. I don't think that there's going to be any issues with Joe playing week one.
For sure. Again, I had to get it out of the way. I don't think anybody you saw him kind of moving around a little bit the other day at practice with the bucket hat on. I'm not concerned. I think we all know that you're never going to mismanage someone who's worth $300 million at the minimum.
Facts. Yeah.
That would be absolute career and just career malpractice. I don't think Cincinnati would ever do that. I think when he's good to go, he'll be ready to go. I also think the team's talented as hell. So, I mean, we know it's talented as hell. But with that being said, obviously, like I made mention of earlier, 2 years removed from a Super Bowl, 1 year, one game short of the Super Bowl, tough couple of calls down the stretch in that championship game the last time we saw you guys play. Just what I want to know is what's it like as a fan where it's you go through these trials to actually get to finally having a competitive, not necessarily a competitive team, but a team that you believe in can really win a championship every year, because you've had a bunch of competitive teams in the past. People forget that because you haven't had playoff success. You didn't have the playoff success that you've had as of recently with Burrow, but Cincinnati's always had really good teams.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So how is it now as opposed to where it's like, I guess it's you guys were the hunted, but it's like every year now that expectation is the big game or it's the season's looked at as a colossal failure. What's the difference between now and then for you?
I think then for me, the Andy Dalton era, we had Super Bowl caliber teams in terms of talent, in terms of coaching staff and stuff like that. Like coaching staffs full of guys that ended up as head coaches and, top 5 defenses. But for us, I think that we kind of learned throughout those situations where you have to have a quarterback. And I think as soon as we got Joe, I kind of felt like the Super Bowl window would be open just because he's that great of a quarterback. I knew that the culture was going to change. I didn't know that he was going to go to the Super Bowl the next season, right? But I knew that he was special, and I knew
Absolutely.
that they had talent. I knew that the Bengals could build talent and put that together. And I felt like once they were able to get a Jamar Chase and to get some of these guys that started coming to the team, because as soon as Joe was signing with it or getting drafted by the team, a lot of guys started signing with the team. So then you get a DJ Reader, then you get a Chidobe Awuzie, then you get a Mike Hilton. And you kind of just notice that, if you follow players and what they think, it's pretty much spot on. And so seeing all of these players come to the Bengals and want to sign with them, I felt like everything was on the up and up. So that was a huge difference right there. Like there wasn't really too many veterans not veterans, but like young players in their prime that were signing up to play with the Bengals when Andy Dalton was here. When Joe Burrow was here, you started seeing guys 25, 24, like signing during their prime with the Bengals. So that was definitely different. And then the Bengals ownership, they started doing a lot of things differently in terms of connecting with the fans, in terms of proving to Joe Burrow that they were willing to put a contender out on the field. And I think you just saw a lot of differences from there. The standard was essentially risen by Joe Burrow and by Zach Taylor. The culture completely changed. They started going after winners and captains and guys from leadership positions to put into that locker room that weren't scared of the Pittsburgh Steelers, weren't scared of the Ravens and stuff like that, because on their respective teams.
You're saying Vontaze was scared?
Nah, Vontaze wasn't scared per se. But the Steelers were kind of like a hurdle we couldn't get over, right? It was almost mental at that point, to the point where when this new thing came in and they swept the Steelers, there wasn't even like a celebration for it. Whereas before, the standard was, we've been trying to get over this hump for the longest. And it was really just kind of a business-like situation. And that's what Joe Burrow, I think, brought to the team. Even when the Bengals went out in the playoffs and beat the Raiders, Joe Burrow didn't celebrate. Like the thing about Joe is he's not just a great player. He's a great leader. He does a lot of symbolic things. He tries to lead by example. So when everybody in Cincinnati was celebrating the playoffs and all of that, Joe said one thing that still stuck with me. He wasn't celebrating. He was like, this is the standard. We should expect to, win the first round of the playoffs from here on out. And we should expect to compete for a championship. And for them to, pretty much feed off of his energy and make that run to the Super Bowl and come within one play short because of an offensive line problem, and to overcome the offensive line just that whole season was miraculous. But it's a huge difference, man. And Joe Burrow is really the difference, because before that, you had a Carson Palmer, you had an Andy Dalton, but they didn't really inspire others like that. Like Carson was really quiet, so you didn't really hear much from him. Like he would go out there and play, but when it came to taking accountability for losses and stuff like that, he was a little mum on that. He kind of would blame other people other than that. Whenever it's been Joe, he's taken that and put it on his shoulders. And so I would say the biggest difference is the standards have risen. Like there was a time where people in Cincinnati, they just wanted to win a playoff game. Well, Joe Burrow and this team, and I think now the fans expect to win championships.
Absolutely. And that's why I asked, because like I said, there's this huge misconception about Cincinnati football that like you guys are like some like losing organization, or like you guys have had tons of success. And It's just the playoff success is where it just changes. And like you said, that's why I wanted to really just get into it. Because like I said, there's just the stigma on the internet of idiots that just think when they say football, they just think like they're not good. And I'm just like, bro, like they were getting to the playoffs every year.
It's like they treat us like we're the Browns, or like, and no shot at them, because they've tried to at least change the narrative. But the Bengals, we were always making the playoffs. It just was that we couldn't get over that hump. Marvin Lewis really turned the franchise around because I was there for the years where the Bengals were winning, 2 and 3 games. And when Marvin Lewis came, he completely changed the culture around, started winning games. Those were years where we would actually, beat the Ravens and do all of that stuff, win the division. But we would just get there and something would happen. It would always be something. And honestly, most of the times I felt like the team started to take on the attributes of the head coach, which unfortunately was Marvin Lewis. I loved Marvin for where he brought us from, but the message just got stale. And, the way that he would fumble and burn through his timeouts, it seems like that's how they would throw games away in those playoff times. So, yeah, the Bengals definitely had some success, but they just couldn't transfer that success into the playoffs.
So with the new culture and with the new standard comes overanalyzation from everywhere, right? Hey, that's the everything. So we know about Lou Anarumo, amazing defensive coordinator, turned down a couple of jobs in the offseason to become a head coach, took some interviews, ultimately returned to Cincinnati. All I've been hearing in the offseason, Von Bell's gone, Jesse Bates is gone. Jesse Bates just got a ton of money from the Atlanta Falcons. He had an all-pro season 2 years ago. I think is it 2 or 3 years ago with you guys was absolutely outstanding. Von Bell we know his track record as a player as well. My questions is as far as we know the losses, right? Mm-hmm. What are some additions and players that might not be household names that everyone knows, but because of Lou Anarumo's genius and ability to deploy these people the right way, are going to be the difference as opposed to the detriment that everyone expects because these two guys have moved on to another place? Like, what is your take on that? And who are the guys that you see fulfilling or changing what they do in Cincinnati to just continue that upward trend we've seen from your team defensively over the last 2 years?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing was keeping Lou. Like, even though, we did lose those two guys, Lou is kind of the engine for that whole entire defense. He's able to get the best out of certain players. So I would say some of those players, and typically in Cincinnati, the way that we kind of do things is we kind of prepare ourselves for certain situations. So they tried to reach out to Jesse, tried to get the number down for something that was going to work, because the Bengals, they're always kind of a forward-thinking franchise. They're always about a year or two ahead. So at that point, they kind of realized that it wasn't going to work with extending Jesse, being able to, extend Joe, try to keep T, try to keep Jamar and all of these things, the linebackers that were available at the time. So they pretty much figured, all right, we're going to have to create some insurance for that. So they did that with drafting Dax Hill. And generally they usually do that. They draft like a guy in the first round, and generally that guy replaces whoever the big loss may be. And with Dax Hill, the thing that was cool about it was with Jesse holding out last year, Dax immediately got, a full camp at free safety last year until Jesse Bates came back for the season. The other thing about Jesse was you kind of mentioned the all-pro season, and he did have that in 2020. The funny thing that a lot of people didn't realize is during the Super Bowl season, he actually didn't have his best year throughout the regular season. He turned it on in the playoffs and became that player. But Dax Hill essentially has been groomed for that role. And then they went out, and I talked about them having this culture of grabbing guys from winning teams and, captains and stuff like that. So they went out and grabbed Nick Scott from the Rams, a guy that, played in the Super Bowl, started in the Super Bowl, played on a Super Bowl winning team. So they went and did that. They also drafted the same year that they drafted Dax Hill. They drafted another safety by the name of Tyson Anderson. He was under the radar. He actually had a great preseason last year. And what they tried to do is just kind of change that room. Lou kind of inherited a defense with guys that weren't necessarily his guys, and Jesse Bates was kind of like the last one. And what he kind of had a picture for with his new safeties, and what you'll see most of these guys matching, is more athleticism. So you'll see faster, stronger guys out there. So Tyson, I believe, ran a 4.3. Dax ran a 4.3 as well. And then they also in the draft this year,
Dax got skills. He definitely, that center field role, like you saw it in the first preseason game where he got from one side to the next and was able to make plays. So recency. I'm trying to remember like what I want to, but sorry to cut you off.
Yeah, for sure. No, you're good. And then they actually surprised me because I always thought that, hey, why not draft the safety? But I didn't think that they were going to do it. And then they went out there and they drafted Jordan Battle, who comes from Alabama, obviously a team that won national championships. This was a true freshman, a guy that's really smart. So I think that you'll see a lot of guys at the safety position that they have there. And then you still have Logan Wilson, who's one of the best players on the defense. Jermaine Pratt is very underrated, one of the top linebackers, in my opinion, in the league, but just doesn't get the credit for it. So they were able to keep those two guys. And I just feel like another under the radar guy may be Zach Carter. It was a defensive tackle, 3-tech that they took last year out of UF. I was really high on him, really wanted them to take him. But last year he was playing at about 280. He's since then put on about 300 pounds. His pass rush win rate this offseason has been crazy. So it looks like he's going to definitely take a step because 3-tech was actually a big loss for them once they lost Larry Ogunjobi. You talk about on the way to the Super Bowl, that was a huge loss. And then the season after, they really struggled. And 3-tech was really something where they struggled at. So that guy, BJ Hill, I mean, a lot of guys on their defense are underrated. And so there's a bunch of guys that I can name. DJ Turner, the young corner that they got, they also tried to get more athletic. I would just say that the defense is way faster than it was a year prior. So I think that they're going to compensate what they lost on defense with keeping all of the other guys that they pretty much had. You talk about a Cam Taylor-Britt. He was originally supposed to start anyway before Eli Apple, but because Cheeto got hurt, he had to play. He actually played really good against Stephon Diggs. So there's a lot of good players that have returned to this defense that know how to play with you. And Lou is just a smart guy. He teaches them route recognition concepts and stuff like that just really throws people off. So I think that they'll get by with that. And those are some of the guys that I would say are kind of under the radar that will help this defense continue to pick up where they left off.
See, I'm glad I brought you on, man, because like I said, I wanted the in-depth Bengals thoughts only, because like I said, I've noticed that your fan base's presence on the internet is second to none. I cannot deny that. Obviously, we talked about the safety position. Going into 2023, is the mentality Super Bowl or bust? What are your expectations? What is your personal expectation for this team? And as far as record, the division, just the season in general, where are you at?
I think it's definitely Super Bowl or bust, because I don't even know how the last 2 years we've been able to keep our entire coaching staff and keep that continuity going. But I feel like the biggest reason why it's definitely Super Bowl or bust is the fact that we've tried to fix our biggest weakness, which has been that offensive line. Bringing in a guy like Orlando Brown to solidify that left tackle position was really needed. There's a lot of fans, some notable fans that try to cape for Jonah Williams. I'm not going to cape for Jonah Williams. He was horrible. He was trash, gave up 13 sacks. That's 13 sacks. But moving him over to the right and bringing in the guys that they did last year to help that interior, which in 2021, the interior was horrible. They fixed that, but then they didn't have what they needed at the left tackle position. They had Lyle Collins, who was playing hurt last year. He started to turn up around the Saints game, but then unfortunately goes down. So I feel like the offensive line is better. And I feel like the depth at tackle is better, because the depth at tackle has killed them the last 2 seasons. They trotted out Hakeem Adeniji. They lost Riley Reef and had to put him out there. They had to put Isaiah Prince out there last year. It just was a lot of nastiness in terms of that. And I feel like they fixed that. And I've always felt like, because it's funny, because initially I wasn't Team Chase. I didn't want Jamar Chase after the 2020 season. I wanted us to get some offensive linemen.
That's one thing that Cincinnati Bengals cannot fault me for. I said before the draft, I said he's generational. I never seen anything like. I said I haven't seen anything like it since like a Randy Moss or T.O.
Facts.
He's got that type of talent. If you don't know what you're looking at, go look at the tape of him at LSU. Matchup, he's different, and I think he's better than Jefferson. But that's a conversation we'll get into some other time, because people don't want to hear that. I think it's not even close. If you ask me, I don't think it's close. But again, that's a conversation for someone else, because production can fool some people, right? Isn't that how the game works? So yeah, other than that, in regards to you, like you said, I want to hear a record, man. I want to hear
I think this team, like, the way that the Bengals put together those 10 straight wins, while Jamar Chase was pretty much out, came back. I think that they learned something that season. Like the 2021 team, even though they made it to the Super Bowl, I can almost say that the 2022 team was better. They just didn't have, the same luck. This team, I think everything is really lined up for them to really make a run at least 13 wins. I think at least it's probably 12. I think that I'm pretty much falling on 13 because I feel like they know how to play the Chiefs. They had the opportunity to beat the Chiefs because, they get the ball back with that time with Burrow. We just couldn't, pretty much block Chris Jones. And so not taking anything away from them, we kind of know how to play that team. Then you bring over an asset from the Chiefs to the Bengals and Orlando Brown that's going to kind of weaken them on that offensive line front there. He knows, how that team operates. So you have that. And then you have Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. I mean, these guys, they have that championship pedigree. Everybody is focused right now. The players and everyone is focused on that Super Bowl. You got T. Higgins, like he's not even talking about his contract. He's still working out at camp right now because their focus is pretty much on the championship. So I would say that that's the focus for everybody. Everybody's wired in. Everybody's tapped in. Everybody's looking at the long-term picture. And that's why you kind of heard Jamar Chase tell Joe not to rush back because there's bigger fish for them to fry. And that's what, the goal is. But first, they always start with trying to take care of the division first. And then once you do that, moving on to the playoffs and stuff like that. But it's definitely that kind of feeling in Cincinnati. And they try to do everything that they could to, change any deficiencies they had. Another thing that they were deficient at in that game is once they lost Tyler Boyd in the game, they didn't have a dependable wide receiver for. Unfortunately, even though Trent Irwin had a great season, he wasn't able to really do things at that position. So they went into the draft this year and drafted Andre Yosivas out of Princeton and Charlie Jones as well.
Tell us about Yoshi. I've been hearing.
Yoshi is a dog, man.
I don't want to fuck up his name. See, that's the thing.
No, you good.
Not one of those names, man, where I'm just like, what's his name?
Andre Yosivas. So
yes.
I would say obviously he's a rookie, right? But I will definitely say this is way better than what we had at wide receiver 4 through 6 last year, for sure. Him and Charlie Jones. Andre I'm expecting him to probably be an outside receiver. So for the most part, he'll be able to do that. He's really had a really good preseason. They've put him in situations where they're throwing to him on third down. You already know if they're going to a receiver on third down, they definitely trust you. So he's had a great preseason. Charlie Jones is more of a slot. He's kind of the heir apparent to Tyler Boyd if they can't keep him after this season. But if something happens to Tyler Boyd like it did last year, they feel like Charlie Jones is a guy that can be a little bit more dependable. And then you also still have Trenton Irwin. So I think that they've gotten stronger in the areas that they were deficient at, offensive line, wide receiver depth. They've gotten more athletic in the secondary. And then they also added more from a pass rushing aspect with them adding in Myles Murphy, who, to me, in my opinion, he's more of a run stopper at this point in his career because he has to develop some more pass rush moves. But if he can give you some juice and depth behind Trey Hendrickson with a guy like Joseph Osai, that's going to definitely help them take the step forward. So I think it is Super Bowl or bust for sure.
Trey is the most underrated superstar in football.
Yeah,
Trey
for sure.
I think people, not a household name. People don't, and I don't know why, but he's an amazing talent that for some reason people just forget. You guys y'all gave him big money too, and he's been every penny worth it. Like it's just how he continues to fly under the radar is beyond me. He's one of those really, really talented guys. Even Hubbard, another guy is solid and always consistent. So you said Super Bowl or bust. Any thoughts on and I'm gonna give you an opportunity. Any thoughts on the division? The just in general across the league, any takes, anything that you want to put out there into the universe in regards to the league feel free.
Yeah, I mean, I said it last year when everybody was saying the AFC West was the toughest division in football. It's not even a hot take anymore. AFC North, I think, is just one of the toughest divisions just because you have the Steelers, you have the Ravens, you have us, and then you have the Browns who, aren't the joke anymore because they've got talent over there. They just have to get it together. And so I think, once again, this division is going to be a dogfight. I do see the Bengals in and out on top. You do have some things that have happened with the Ravens. Obviously with Lamar getting some weapons over there, they're going to definitely be a challenge. I think that they're the biggest challenge in the division. The Steelers, one thing that I say that again.
What do you think of their pass rush?
So if you're talking about the edge rushers of their pass rush, you know that I feel like the edge rushers are mid. The pass rush itself actually isn't bad because they try to blitz linebackers, they blitz corners, they blitz, a little bit of everybody. So they actually end up with a lot of sacks. But if we're specifically talking about the edge rushers, it's a little mid over there. I also wonder with them, man, the loss of Marlon Humphrey and the loss of Marcus Peters. I just don't know how that's going to affect their defense because a lot of people forget before they got Roquan, they really had a tough season in that secondary the year before. They were like one of the worst secondaries in the league statistically. So with them not having Marlon Humphrey and with them not having another consistent corner that allowed Marlon Humphrey to drop into the slot and move outside, I really wonder how that's going to go. But, hopefully their offensive changes will help balance that out. But the Steelers, one thing I learned about them, even though I hate them, Mike Tomlin knows how to win games, dog. So, even though I don't believe in Kenny Pickett, I do think Kenny Pickett can do enough to have them in contention. I will just say what I've told my Steelers friend Tony Serino that I do AFC North Talk with. You can get to the playoffs, but he's Andy Dalton, dog. Whenever you actually get to that big time game, the Steelers aren't going to be able to pull it out. Whenever you're going against a quarterback that's going to be better than him, it's going to be a tough way for them to win. But then when it comes to the AFC, man, I think the Bills, and I'm not just saying this because we mopped the floor with them, but the Bills, the Stephon Diggs and Josh Allen relationship can really derail that team. I don't think a lot of people are really looking at it that way, and I feel like they may have missed the boat potentially on them being the big opponent for the Chiefs. But I think that is going to be a situation to really monitor this season. And I think even in that division, Aaron Rodgers is still there, dog. The Jets are a really good team. I thought that they were a good team last year. They just didn't have the quarterback. Now they've got the quarterback. Who knows what Aaron Rodgers has up his sleeve? Because seeing him do that pay cut, I'm like, nah, there's something else that he's planning over there. There's somebody else that he's trying to bring over there, and it's just not Dalvin Cook. So I wouldn't sleep on the Jets either. But overall, man, I think the AFC is going to be loaded, bro. The AFC is full. We don't need any more Caleb Williams or anybody trying to join the AFC. Stay over there. Go to the NFC. We don't need you because we're full over here in the AFC.
Oh man, listen, I'm just grateful for football being back, to be totally honest, man. I'm excited for it. I really wanted to make sure I tapped in with listen, and this is what I'm doing. I haven't really let the world know. I'm trying to keep close contact with the 10 teams that I think have a legit shot at winning a championship. It's going to be a short list. People don't want it to be a short list, or be honest, but it's some teams aren't winning the title. Cincinnati is one of those teams for sure has a chance. So it's good to just get in touch with their fan base. I look to doing this a couple more times throughout the season. After wins, after losses. I'm a 49er fan. I'm obviously people are familiar with that as far as the timeline goes. But again, I really do appreciate your time, Ace Boogie from the Cincinnati podcast. I know you also New Stripe City, and what was the second one? AFC
North. AFC North Talk. Yep.
So see, I did remember. But again, man, really grateful for your time. Appreciate you joining me. Last question before I get out of here. Who are you playing in the Super Bowl?
Man, honestly, I wouldn't be mad at a rematch of Bengals and Niners. I actually really wanted that the year that we played the Rams. It wouldn't surprise me if it was Niners or Eagles, man. I think either you could flip a coin. Either one of those teams, I think, is going to be there.
All right, fair enough. I just wanted to make sure I get that on wax. He said us. Smart guy. I can't talk no shit for at least 6 weeks. But yeah, man, I appreciate it. We'll get back to this soon.
Yes, sir.
Peace.